The Game of Love is based upon the Anatole plays of Arthur Schnitzler, all about the love affairs of this man in Vienna in the 1890s. Music is by Offenbach, with arrangements by Nancy Ford, who also wrote 4 additional melodies for it. And the cast is Anatole and his best friend Max, and there are 3 men who play all the people we encounter in Vienna. And then there are 5 love affairs, so there are 5 women. But if you have an extremely talented and versatile actress, they can all be played by one woman. And so it begins, Max comes out, walks over by the orchestra. The orchestra is piano, cello, and violin. He looks at the audience and he says, "How to begin? How can I possibly start?" It had no beginning and it had no end. It went round and round like a waltz. However, I suppose if I had to find a way, I should say it began with Vienna, and the music begins to play. Vienna. It sometimes happens that time and place get curiously mingled up. For if you should ask me when it began, I should have to respond with Vienna. And if you should ask me where it began, I should have to reply, then. And he sings, "In Vienna it's almost night, and the sky has begun to blur. In Vienna it's almost night, and Vienna begins to stir. In Vienna the shadows reach out. They make love to the fading light. In Vienna the shadows reach out, and the women walk into sight." And as the song goes on, we gradually reveal the set to be Anatole's bachelor apartment. At the end of the song, Max says to the audience, "Part 1, ask me no questions." Anatole comes in and he says, "I think she's deceiving me." "Well, if you feel that way, why don't you call it off?" I do. Every day I call it off. And then at night, Max says yes. And then at night. The other day we had a quarrel, and she called me a jealous monster, and I went raging out of the apartment, storming. And when I came back later, it was dim. The lights were dim, and there was a fire in the fireplace. And Cora was lying on the sofa, wrapped up in my robe. And she opened it up, and she was naked. And I knelt beside her, and she closed us up inside the robe. And I felt for a little moment, like some sort of wonderful something, a god, instead of merely just another actor in a typical boulevard farce. You think I'm silly, don't you? Max says, "I think you're romantic." Yes, you're right, that's what I am, a romantic fool. And he sings, "I love to be in love, such is my foolish fate, destined to fall before them all, but never to satiate. I love to be in love. I don't know why it is so. All that I know is love appears no matter where I go. Innocent eyes, is it a sham? Who is the tiger? Who is the lamb? I don't know why I give a damn. I just love to be in love. I love to be in," and Max sings, "Epicurean. I love to be in love." So Max asks what he's going to do about it. And Anatole says he's going to hypnotize her. He's been taking lessons. And Annie comes in and she agrees to be hypnotized. She does a very elaborate, fun song as she's hypnotized. And then she's lying there. Oh, let me have a sip of my water. she's hypnotized. She's lying there on the sofa. And Anatole says, well, what should I ask her? And Max says, ask her how old she is. 24. Cora, how old are you? And she says, 27. Max says, she's hypnotized, all right. So Anatole says, all right, I'm going to ask her. And he says, do you love me? And she says, yes. And he's so happy. She loves me. And Max says, what about the other one now? Is she true to you? Yes. Is she true to me? That's no good. It's too, and then he starts coming up, and through the whole little scenelet, which is very short, he keeps avoiding asking the question. Finally, he tells Max, would you mind waiting in the other room? If I'm going to be deceived, I've decided I would rather hear it by myself. Max says, of course. He leaves. Anatole goes over and kneels beside Cora on the sofa, and he says, how beautiful, sleeping tigress. How well I know you, how completely I understand. And he sings, you love to be in love, such is your foolish fate, destined to fall before them all, but never to satiate. Wake up, wake up. And he begins to cover her with kisses. She says, that feels good. And she wakes up, she kisses him back. He picks her up, he takes her into the bedroom. This is a chamber musical, and that is the chamber which is most often referred to, although never explicitly seen. Well, episode number 2 is called The Farewell Supper, and takes place in Socker's elegant restaurant in Vienna, in a private dining room. And Anatole and sitting there with Max, and he's trying to figure out how to get out of the relationship that he's in with Annie. And he says, I've taken her to dinner here every night this week, but when the time comes, I just can't find the words. Max says, and you can find them now. She bores me. I see. And there's somebody else who doesn't. And what a somebody. Max says, what type is the new one? The new one's not a type, just the opposite. She's a special creation. Max says, strange, isn't it? We never know the type until it's all over. Anatole says, she's such an innocent. Well, I bring her a little bunch of flowers, and there's a tear gleaming in her eye. Max says, try her with a diamond bracelet. No. This is one time when you're completely wrong. I would never dream of bringing her up here, for example. No. For her, a funny little cafe in the suburbs with cheap decor. I've taken her to dinner every night at a place like that. Max says, but you just told me that you ate here with Annie. That's just it. I've had 2 dinners every evening. One with the woman I wanted to win, and the other with the woman I wanted to lose. And now I can't go on with it any longer. Indigestion? No, not indigestion. I can't go on because basically I'm a very honest man. Annie comes in. She's adorable, a dancer, sunny disposition. But the main thing about Annie is that she truly, passionately loves to eat. And in the course of this playlet, she's constantly eating, drinking wine, and nearly swooning with pleasure every time the waiters bring in a new dish. So Anatole is trying to find the way to break the news that he wants to call off their affair because he's found somebody else. And to his surprise, she tells him that she wants to call it off because she's found somebody else. And he says, well, am I to understand you've received a proposal of marriage? She says, no, of course not. I wouldn't throw you over just because I got married. And he says, throw me over. She says, yes, it has to come out, I suppose. I'm in love, Anatole, terribly in love. But he's poor. And then she has a song she sings. At first she says, it's not only goodbye to you, Anatole, it's goodbye to everything. And she sings, yes, adieu to champagne and to oysters and to filet aux truffes. Yes, adieu to champagne. Every time I drink beer, I'll think of you. Every oyster I used to know will be gone where the oysters go. And though by dawn all my oysters are gone, still the taste will stay on. I'll remember every spoon I chew of cheap cabbage stew will remind me of you and cordon bleu. And she sings more variations, and the waiters sing with her. When it's over, Anatole says, well, I'm glad to hear that you've found somebody, because I've found somebody myself. She says, oh dear, you should have made that up a little bit sooner. He says, it's true, damn it, and she's 1,000 times better looking than you, and she's 1,000 times nicer than you. She says, pass the asparagus. And then he tells her that his affair is not so innocent as the one she's been describing. He's been sleeping with the other girl. And she says, well, that's terrible. You're a brute. And he says, I am, aren't I? She says, I wasn't going to tell you that. What? She says, I never would have told you either. It takes a man to be so inconsiderate. And she says, goodbye, Max, dear. Goodbye, vanille cream. Goodbye, filet à clouf. Goodbye, soccer tort. Goodbye, Anatole. You don't mind if I take these with me, do you? She grabs up a bunch of cigars from the humidor, expensive cigars, and says, not for me, of course, for him. And she leaves, and Max says, well, I said it would go all right. The third episode takes place, it's called The Christmas Gift, and it takes place on the streets of Vienna, Christmas Eve. Anatole encounters the girl that he was in love with when he was young, but she chose instead to marry an older, richer man, and now she lives the life, the stultifying life of a trophy wife. But she's very contemptuous of Anatole and speaking very sarcastically about the girls that he picks up and has affairs with. But then gradually she reveals that she wonders about them. She sees these women and she doesn't know at all what their lives are. But she wants him to tell her about them. And he's reluctant, but he does. And she wants to know about the girl that he's with now. And he sings to the tune of the Barcarolle, the famous tune. He sings, there's a girl, a plain little girl, she's not very much to see. Still that girl, that plain little girl, is lovely as she can be. If you look, there's something like a rainbow in her face. It's as if she had the gift of love, the gift of grace. And she gets, Annette, no, not Annette, I forget all of their names. Anyways, his ex-love gets caught up with it and actually sings part of herself, of the song herself. She says, I can see her at night, such delight when you walk down the hall, such delight in her eyes. I can hear her call, Anatole, Anatole, but I don't know what she says then. What does she say? He says, whatever you say on such an occasion. She says, I need more specifics. What did she say last night? He says, it sounds silly unless you hear her say it. I will imagine her voice. What did she say? I'm happy that you're back again. How? I am happy that you're back again. Yes. That's very beautiful, isn't it? It's very simple. and she sees a cab, and she asks him to call it, which he does. And she says she wants to give something to the girl, and so it's just these flowers. She said, not much, but you have to give her a message too. And she said, tell her, dear little girl, these flowers are a gift from someone who might have been a Gabrielle, who might have been as happy as you if only she had had the courage. And she goes off. And he's standing there with the flowers, and one of the peddlers who've sung earlier in the scene comes over and says, can I get you a taxi, sir? And he says, no, I'm not going anyplace. Not any place at all. Here, you want these? And he gives them the flowers. And then Max comes in and says to the audience, that suggests it might be a good time to have an intermission and get a glass of champagne. So that's the first half. Second half is 2 episodes. It begins with the wedding morning, and it's in Anatole's bedroom again. And Max has come there. It's the morning of his wedding, and he's very hungover. And as Max realizes, he hears a woman's voice and realizes that there's a woman there. And Max says, one doesn't do that, Anatole. I mean, I know men cheat on their wives and so forth, but not on the wedding day. And Anatole said, just hear me out. And he said, after the bachelor party, they all left him, and he was standing in the street, and it was snowing, and he felt sorry for himself, and he thought might be his last night of adventure, maybe his last night of love. So he went to the masked ball, and he picked up an old girlfriend, Ilona. And Max says, oh my God, no, not Ilona. Yes, Ilona, it turns out to be a star of the Viennese musical stage, and a Grand Dame, and a virago. It's somebody you don't want to tangle with. She's sort of like the Patti LuPone of the Viennese operetta at that time. So she comes in, and she's so happy to have found Anatole again, and she keeps saying she's never going to let him out of her sight. She's not going to let him go any place that day. But by the way, I'll just do a little bit of one of her songs. This is something she sings to them from her new success musical that she's doing, and it's a scene where she has killed her lover in revenge and cut him into small pieces and mailed him out parcel post. And now, brought before the judge, she sings her revenge song. I'll just do a little verse from the middle of it. She sings, I laid or fell for a dramatic poet. How could I know it would be a curse? Because the moment my love was overflowing, he'd jump right up and he'd go from bed to verse. I later found him with another woman, and as they lay there shamelessly undressed, I grabbed his pen, I stabbed him then. I scratched these words across his chest, love conquers all, love, and so forth and so on. And so it's a funny, really funny scene, Anatole trying to get out so that he can get married. The fifth and last scene, let me have another drink of water. The fifth and last scene is called Anatole's Boutonnière. The first 4 scenes have taken place in Vienna in the 1890s. This one takes place in the Vienna woods outside the city, and it takes place in 1912. Anatole and Max have gotten back together, haven't seen each other for a long time. Anatole's marriage, no surprise, didn't last. But he's called Max to talk with him, and he talk things out with him, and he has made up his mind not to bother the young and not to be envious of the young and not to go that route. But there is this gorgeous young woman, Annette, that whenever he sees her out walking with her lover, the look that she gives him, it makes very clear it's a look that he knows very well. And he's very attracted, but he's determined not to give in. Well, as happens in musicals and plays, at this point, a group of people come driving up in taxis, kind of boisterous and noisy, and they've come to move their party out here to the suburbs, to the countryside. And they're brought there by an aging old fool named Baron Diebel. And since we did a reading in Miami a couple of years ago, and probably more like 4 or 5, and I played that role. And since I did, I'm going to do a little bit of one of my songs. Again, I'll croak through it like I do, you know. It's a song about ménage à trois. So Baron Diebel sings, I don't care much for groups of 4. Start off with a cough. Let me start over. I don't care much for groups of 4. Any more than that, I just deplore. My mother always said to me, little one, be satisfied with 3. That is why I have such an aversion to anything in the least perverse. And yet I have a little weakness, in spite of all my meekness, one tiny little weakness. 2 young ladies, ooh la la, I just adore a ménage à trois. For oh, the joys that you can incur when your infatuation is triangular. And oh, the pleasures you can produce when you're the bottom of the right hypotenuse. Fun. It was fun to write and fun to do. Anyway, he's brought these people out. Among them is the young girl that Anatole is trying not to get involved with, Annette. And she manages to come out and be alone with him. And she offers herself to him in a very beautiful song where she promises to make him young again. But he says, no, he says, you're very beautiful and you're very young and you will be loved by many men and you will forget them and they will be forgot. But I want to be the one that you remember. Just this once. I want to play a trick on time. She's infuriated, and when the other people come out, she mocks him in front of his friends, and then she goes running off with her young lover, presumably, to find boudoir somewhere. And all the people from the episodes appear on the terrace, and they all sing this little title song, The Game of Love. There's a game people play, a charade, a souffle. It's known as the Game of Love, and so forth. At the end of it, there's a fireworks display in the Vienna Woods, and they all run over to the balustrade to look, and they're all pointing and laughing and everything. And then gradually, the fireworks sound morphs into machine gun fire, and then to mortars, and then to bombs. And as they stand there looking, horrified at what's happening, the lights slowly dim out, and their way of life is over forever.